Hi guys, Mr. Halp here, and this is lesson 6F, specifically the one designed to give you a few more tools for diction that can really enhance your rhetoric. So some of the things that we typically do to alter or change or manipulate in some way, shape, or form your argumentation via specifically diction. So we'll chat about a couple of these. Remember, the next lesson is then the final lesson of the unit, and that'll be specifically rhetorical figures for syntax. And then you'll have a whole bunch of new tricks in your bag that you can be pulling out as you're writing, as you're interpreting rhetoric, and hopefully that just increases the likelihood that you've mastered the art of persuasion, really. So without any further ado, I'm going to dive into this, and let's start off with periphrasis, okay? So periphrasis, as you can see, that first little definition there calls it circumlocution. If that's not a word that is familiar to you, I mean, look at the roots. It literally means to go around something, to go around something. To talk around the issue, to talk around the terminology that's typically used, things of that sort, okay? So as you can see there, it uses a description as a name, as in a euphemism, excuse me. Many words are used where few would suffice. So in that example there, it says, "This institution for cultivating young minds is at a crossroads." So think about that rhetorically speaking. What I'm really saying in that sentence is, this school is at a crossroads. But I'm not saying this school is at a crossroads. I'm saying this institution for cultivating young minds. Clearly, I have some kind of rhetorical motivation for describing it as an institution for cultivating young minds rather than a school. Well, that's going to affect the reader differently. It's, there's different connotation to that. Synonymous with a school, but different connotations and different effect on the reader. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about periphrasis. You're using many words, actually a description, to describe something you might otherwise describe with just a single word, okay? We've got paralipsis, a figure in which you mention something by saying you're not going to mention it, which can therefore make you sound fairer than you really are, and a lot fairer than you deserve to appear, okay? So what you've got there then is, it says, I'm not even going to bring up the issue with the overflowing dam, okay? Well, now think about that. You did just bring up the issue over the overflowing dam. You might not provide any additional details or evidence about that overflowing dam, but you did just bring it up. So that's why we say it makes you sound fairer than you really are, because it's kind of like the things that we've talked about in the past where you're making allusions or innuendos or suggestions for people to infer, and that they can sort of fill in the gaps on their own. And that makes you look like a better person without actually being a better person, because, of course, we can't move our mind from the overflowing dam at this point, okay? So paralipsis, all right? Metastasis, a figure of thought that skips over an awkward matter. So if there's something that you prefer not to discuss, you can metastasis it. That is definitely not a real word. I mean, I'm not using it appropriately there. But notice what we've got in this here example. Instead of addressing the failures of the past, I'd rather discuss the promise of the future. So in that sense, it's kind of like what we talked about previously regarding framing. Remember, when you're framing an argument, you're trying to steer people towards a topic and away from other topics, perhaps. Well, metastasis is just really coming out and saying, I'm not interested in talking about the failures of the past. I just want to talk about the promises of the future. I'm going to frame it in this category, and I'm going to exclude that category from the frame, okay? We've got leptologia, which is using careful language to obfuscate the information. The moral of the story is, for this entire course, you have careful use of language in every situation, because you never know how people are going to take it, and you have to sort of anticipate that. But this is specifically using careful language to obfuscate the information. If we cut down on homework, students might focus on their strengths, which could improve their test scores, okay? So in this case, everything sounds fantastic. I mean, yeah, we want test scores to improve. We want students to focus on their strengths. Yeah, all those are desirable. But it doesn't really take into account the fact that cutting down on homework may also make test scores worse. Or more homework might actually improve test scores. So you're kind of using language to make it look like you're to disguise the fact, let's put it that way, to disguise the fact that you're ignoring key components of logic within the scope of that sentence. Okay, so leptologia. You've got epergesis. This is the correction figure, and I've kind of talked about this with you guys before. The whole concept of the correction figure following a feigned mistake with further description, definition, or title intended to be more accurate. So you've done this to some degree. You're correcting yourself, and really it's deliberate though, and that's an important component of this. You're faking that mistake so that things end up looking more like a mistake when they're really not a mistake. So in this case, you've got that example. The book is good. What I mean is, it's life-changing. So you're starting by just this ho-hum little, it's good. No, wait, I stand corrected. It is life-changing, okay? Think about how much more impassioned that will seem rather than just saying from the get-go, the book is life-changing. Compare that to, the book is good. What I mean is, it's literally life-changing, okay? So, yeah, there's a big difference in that case. All right, so we've got adianoeta, which is a word I'm sure I've just butchered, but that's not the point at the moment, so I'm not grading you on Latin pronunciation. Remember that, guys. So adianoeta, the figure of the hidden meaning, which may be understood differently by different audiences and or audience members. So sort of that little wink and a nudge like we've talked about before to say, not everyone's going to get this, but I'm pretty sure that some of you out there are going to get this, and you're the people I'm really talking to at this point in time. Okay? So it's saying, like, I'm sure my opponent has plenty of interesting ideas, if only they were relevant to the issue. Okay, so think about what that's insinuating in this case. It's insinuating that a lot of people are probably already in agreement that his issues are a little off topic or maybe tangential in some way, shape, or form, but also presumably that there is some sort of harmony between a certain group in the audience or the entire audience and you as opposed to that opponent. So there's this hidden meaning that's embedded within a statement like that that really comes to light if you're on the right side of that argument with the speaker, okay? And then, of course, we have cliche twisting, which gives us a whole bunch of different options at our disposal because cliches are everywhere and you're going to be predisposed to using them. And, well, we'll talk about that more in a couple of moments. Using that kind of overworked language to your advantage because it is overworked. And because it's overworked, it has a consequence of often being ineffective. Well, so how the heck can we make it a little bit more effective? All right. So first off, we need to define this. What exactly is a cliche? Well, it's an expression that was once fresh and original, but has lost much of its vitality through overuse. So the saying, better late than never, or actions speak louder than words. Okay. We've heard that so many times. If I were to write that in a rhetorical essay on the AP Lang test, the grader would probably break up laughing because it's just so obvious. It's such a thing that people say. And that's why we have that next bullet there. Unaltered cliches should be avoided in writing. It just makes you sound like you're regurgitating what other people have said. It doesn't make it sound like you have an interesting perspective or thought of your own, okay? So how can we use these cliches? How can we twist them, okay? First off, we've got that concept of a literal interpretation, reducing a cliche to absurdity by seeming to take it at face value. So I'm taking those two examples that I've got up there and sort of building my examples off of those and whatnot. So here we've got literal interpretation, reducing a cliche to absurdity. Actions speak louder than words? Well, his actions said nothing worth repeating in polite company. Okay, so think about that, okay? We don't really mean that actions literally speak louder than words, but we're reducing it to an absurd way by saying that, well, whatever he did do, it's not polite to talk about in good society, okay? So we're taking it above and beyond what it normally would be in that case, okay? We come down to surprise ending or a paraprosdokion, okay? Which is the figure that attaches a surprise ending to a thought that appears predictable at first. And I'm going to use, in this case, a better late than never. And if I want to make a paraprosdokion of that, I might say, sure, but better late than unfashionably early, okay? And so you'll see it starts the same. You have this anticipation that it's going to play out the same way that you've always known it to play out. But then, we throw you for a loop in the end and say unfashionably early rather than late, okay, or never, excuse me, all right? And then, of course, we have reworking, which is just switching words around in a cliche, okay? And that's for that same example. This is one personally of my own construction that I use all the time. When somebody says better late than never, particularly about a homework assignment, my response is generally, yeah, but never late is better. Okay, so I've taken the existing content and I've just reorganized it. Okay, and it makes sense. It has some meaning to it right there. Okay. Lastly, in terms of diction, remember, you can be like Shakespeare, and if you are like Shakespeare, it's not without outside of the realm of possibility that you'll be inventing your own new words. And we've got 4 ways that you can go about that. The thing to keep in mind about this is, again, this is a classic example of you breaking the rules in a rhetorically minded, intelligent way. And so you can do this. You just need to make sure that we understand what you're saying. So it needs to be a situation in which you're making up this brand spanking new word, but we're not confused by it. And there's some tricks to that, but there are also, you also just have to sort of play it by your instinct, okay? So first one, we've got anthemeria, which is when you turn a noun into a verb or vice versa, okay? So turn a noun into a verb or vice versa. So I said, I'm tacoing all night long, okay? I took the noun taco and I turned it into a verb, and presumably you're going to understand that, well, I'm just going to pig out on Mexican food all night long. So that's my anthemeria in that case, okay? You've got parcelon, which is to strip a word of its meaning and use it as a pause or for emphasis, okay? So it really starts to lose its meaning as a consequence. Remember, it's more about the pause than it is about the meaning. So it says, I want your respect. Respect more than anything else in this world, okay? So you can see, it gives you that moment to sort of pause and think and contemplate a little bit. It's more about the pause than it is about the actual meaning of that word respect in that case. Of course, you're going to choose one of the more important words in the sentence to do it with. So in that sense, the meaning is, of course, relevant, but it loses its meaning other than just continued thought-provoking for that particular concept, okay? You've got neologisms, newly minted words, a word that you yourself have coined, and we hopefully will get a good sense of what it means based on the context, maybe because of roots and affixes, things of that sort, and that will hopefully help us to understand what's going on. So case in point, here's this one. Great tool to make a neologism is to make a compound word that has never existed before, which is kind of what's happening here. He's my snooze crush because he's just an adorable sleeper. So the logic is somebody is so adorable when they're sleeping and only when they're sleeping that they become, quote unquote, your snooze crush, okay? And my guess is that you can walk away from that sentence and say, yeah, I know what a snooze crush is. That makes complete and total sense, okay? Copyright 2024, Mr. Zachary Haupt, okay? So that's a neologism, all right? And then nominalization, which is kind of like anthemeria. In this case, we're specifically changing a verb into a noun. So here's an expression that people often use, and that does exactly this. I'm going to give it a think, okay? So think is obviously a verb, but in this case, we're using it contextually in that sentence as a noun. So I'm going to give it a think, okay? That's not typically a correct sentence, as you can see by the blue squiggly line on my screen right now, but we all understand what they're trying to communicate, okay? So this is just a whole bunch of other tactics and tricks that you can use to sort of manipulate and intensify the rhetoric in your paper by playing around with diction. We're going to talk about syntax next time. And again, as with all of the stuff in this unit, remember, the goal is A, try and use it in your own writing. B, see if you can spot it in other people's writing, especially when you're picking out sources and or doing a rhetorical analysis essay. So, as always, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to bring them to class the next time I see you, and I will miss you all, guys.